with Jai Radha Madhava. Hare Krishna.
Jaya
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada. We had some people join us then. Well, yes, Anita. How are you, Anita? Hare Krishna. And Super Krishna, we got two of you up now. Anyway, so without further ado, we'll begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Srimad Bhagavatam, we're on the second chapter. How many classes have you had since I was away? Have you had many? Maybe what, 3, 4? 2 classes. Oh, only 2. It's more than 2 weeks since I dropped off. 3? 2 or 3?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. We have the first canto, second chapter,
Yeah.
verse number 7, 8.
7, 8. Oh, I was going to talk on 5. Anyway, let's have a look. Let's see what we've got. Verse number 7 and 8. Okay. Oh, we missed number 6 as well. Would anybody mind if I picked up on number 5 where I left off? I was going to talk on number 5 the last time that I was here. Anyway, let's look at 7 and 8.
We can do 5. That's okay.
We can do 5?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do number 5. All right. Munaya sadhu prishto ham bhavadviya lokamangalam yatkrita krishna samprashno yenatma suprasidati. O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self. This is a nice purport. I'm going to read the purport. Since it has been stated herein before that in the Bhagavatam the absolute truth is to be known, the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya are proper and just because they pertain to Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 15, the Personality of Godhead says that in all the Vedas there is nothing but the urge for searching after him, Lord Krishna. Thus, the questions that pertain to Krishna are the sum and substance of all Vedic inquiries. The whole world is full of questions and answers. The birds, beasts, and men are all busy in the matter of perpetual questions and answers. In the morning, the birds in the nest become busy with questions and answers. And in the evening also, the same birds come back and again become busy with questions and answers. The human being, unless he is fast asleep at night, is busy with questions and answers. The businessmen in the market are busy with questions and answers, and so also are the lawyers in the court and the students in the schools and colleges. The legislators in the parliament are also busy with questions and answers, and the politicians and press representatives are all busy with questions and answers. Although they go on making such questions and answers for their whole lives, they are not at all satisfied. Satisfaction of the soul can only be obtained by questions and answers on the subject of Krishna. Krishna is our most intimate master, friend, father, or son, and object of conjugal love. Forgetting Krishna, we have created so many objects of questions and answers, but none of them are able to give us complete satisfaction. All things but Krishna give temporary satisfaction only. So if we are to have complete satisfaction, we must take to the questions and answers about Krishna. We cannot live for a moment without being questioned or without giving answers. Because the Srimad Bhagavatam deals with questions and answers that are related to Krishna, we can derive the highest satisfaction only by reading and hearing this transcendental literature. One should learn the Srimad Bhagavatam and make an all-round solution to all problems pertaining to social, political, or religious matters. Srimad Bhagavatam and Krishna are the sum total of all things. This is very important to accept. Srimad Bhagavatam is a historical document. It's a document about things which actually happened. This conference of these sages at Naimisharanya actually happened. And the 6 questions that they asked Sutta Goswami actually were asked. And they were asked with intention, very, very clear intention and understanding. So often we meet people who we give some presentation about Krishna consciousness, and they say, well, yes, that's your belief. And I say very regularly to them, and it surprises them, and I say, well, that's your belief. You believe that what I know is simply a belief. And that's a very difficult thing for people to get to terms with, especially when it comes to the subject of the absolute truth. Because people think it's just about God. And that's really just about what you believe, because nobody can prove that there is a God or that there isn't a God. But of course, none of that is true. That is all belief. All of those kind of statements, they're not statements of knowledge, they're statements of belief. And of course, you can believe whatever you like, but does that make it the truth? I mean, I always quote the example of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich in Germany, the Nazis. They were propagating a belief. It was a false belief, but it was, and it was not, because it was false, it had no foundation in fact. It was just a concoction. But on the basis of that concoction, a whole nation became enthralled. I read a story once by a man called Eugene Ionesco. He's Biogita. Eugene Ionesco was a French journalist. He later became a playwright. He wrote a number of plays about the absurdity of material life, actually. But he wrote it. He was at the Nuremberg rallies with the Nazis, and he wrote an article about how he was there. And he said he was on the sidewalk, and the sidewalk was 15, 20 people deep along this big boulevard. And he could see up to, there was a T junction at the end. and he was about halfway down. And he was there as a reporter, and he was just going to objectively write about everything he saw. And he explained that there, of course, everybody, as Adolf Hitler was coming down the boulevard at the T-junction, and everybody, he could hear off in the distance this roar of people all shouting, "Hail Hitler, Hail Hitler, Hail Hitler." And it was, he said it was like a wave of sound coming through the crowd. And then Hitler's car came into the boulevard that he was in and slowly started coming down. And he said the sound of this chanting, Hare, I was going to say Hare Krishna, Hail Hitler, Hail Hitler. So used to chanting Hare Krishna. Isn't that? Oh, that's good. That's a good sign. Anyway, he said the wave of sound was getting louder and louder and louder as it rolled down towards him through the crowd. And he said, by the time Hitler's motorcade got level with where he was hailing Hitler just as loud as anyone else. And he was shocked about that, of how he got swept up in it. The kind of mob mentality. But it's a very interesting thing about, because he was just as fervent as everybody else at the time. And then it was all past, and he was like, what did I just do? What did I just do? And this idea of and all those people, they all believed in Adolf Hitler. They all believed that he was the Führer of the German nation, the leader who'd come to reestablish the greatness of Germany and what it was, Deutschland over alles. Finally the dominant greatness of Germany would be realized. It's all a fabrication, all a mental concoction, all based upon false beliefs or believing false things. Every belief is actually real. What your belief is your belief. What you believe is what you believe. But what we have to be actually clear on is it a fact? Is it a fact? And when we come to questions about the ultimate questions of existence, what is the absolute truth? How do we explain the totality of reality? Or how do we understand what is the totality of all that is? Right now, there's all kinds of speculation going on from material scientists about the nature of the universe. How did it come into existence, and so on and so forth. And the predominating theory of it all is that it's all there as a result of the interaction of chemicals, the interaction of material elements. And when it comes to the question of, well, where do the elements come from? There's no answer. There's no answer. But they are adamant that there's no God behind it all. There's no person behind all this. This is all happening as a result of the laws of things, the laws of physics. But that doesn't actually, just in plain common sense, that doesn't make sense. Because wherever we see a product of matter, like who made this watch? The question is always who? Who? There's a story of Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a great theist. And his whole practice of science was for proving the existence of God or discovering how God made things happen in the material world. And the story goes that he had a small planetarium made based upon the discoveries of Galileo and Copernicus and the mathematics of the distance of planets from the sun. And it was this idea of the sun-centered solar system. So it was a very simple construction of axles and cogs and cranks and things, so that when you turned the handle, the planets, which were on little rods sticking out from the central rod where the sun was, they'd move at different speeds around. And Newton had a friend who was an atheist, and the atheist was there one day, and he was fascinated with this thing, cranking the handle and watching it all work and seeing the synchronicity of it all. But he said, Isaac, who made this? And Newton said, nobody. I don't know. I just came in here one morning and there it was. And his friend said, he said, don't patronize me, Isaac. If something as intricate and as engineered as this must have had somebody make it. And Newton turned to him and said, you rascal, you rascal. You look at this model of the real thing and demand somebody must have made that. But when you look at the real thing, you say, well, nobody made that. It just happened without any conscious involvement, with no person involved. Very telling little story. And this is the problem, because that is a belief. The belief that there is no God. Actually, another little story, Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk was engaging devotees in a mock argument about whether God exists or not. And somebody said, well, nobody knows. And Prabhupada's simple reply to that was, how do you know? Have you asked everyone? You can't say nobody knows whether God exists or not until you've asked every single person. You're saying nobody knows, no one knows. Well, until you've asked everybody. And then the difficulty is, we see that the belief that God doesn't exist is so strong in the minds of some people, even they meet a person who is in full knowledge, as Srila Prabhupada is, as all these sages at Naimisharanya are, and especially Sutta Goswami, and then later he introduces Sukadeva Goswami, and then we hear from Narad Muni, and we hear from the 9 Yogendras, we hear from so many qualified personalities, all giving us very detailed information, not just about God, not just about this person, God, but about everything about him and about his creation, and the totality of understanding of all of his energies. All of this comes in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But a person who's so fixed in atheistic thinking will just say, well, that's just your belief. That's just your belief. But we as bhaktas, as actual practitioners of bhakti yoga, we understand actually very quickly, by accepting this as truth, that it is truth. Not just because we become convinced of it and develop a belief that it is, but because on the basis of the answers of the questions that are asked here, we are given a practice by which we have direct connection with Krishna in a personal sense, personal and individual sense. So therefore, and that is undeniable. Your experience is your experience, and nobody can take that away from you. And then we see, now we have International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And within that society, so many diverse people, so many people from so many diverse backgrounds. What does that say? Rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter what your nationality is. It doesn't matter what your race is, what your educational standard is, how much money you've got, what your star sign is, anything. None of these things actually come into play, because we see people with all of these things, they're all having the same experience. They're all having a direct experience of reciprocation with Krishna through the process of questions and answers about Krishna, and therefore hearing and chanting about Krishna. And actually, it's wonderful. The life that opens up to the devotee, to the person who, at least in the beginning, suspends their disbelief. You don't have to believe anything, and you don't have to disbelieve anything, because, as Prabhupada says, it's a science. And as the scientists, as empirical scientists tell us, the facts are the facts. And the simple fact of the matter is that the sound of Krishna's name, the sound of any vibration about Krishna that is factual, is, in other words, based upon these books of knowledge. So we learn Krishna's features, what Krishna looks like, the color, his color, the shape of his eyes, and on, every detail about Krishna, the person, is presented here. And the fundamental point that Krishna is the absolute truth, and that there is no difference between hearing about Krishna and being with Krishna. Bhakti, one of the meanings of the root bhaj of bhakti is to be with Krishna. To be in service to Krishna means actually to be in service with anyone, means to be connected to them, to be with them. Of course, there's remote service and so forth, but generally speaking, service relationships begin and they're established on the basis of meeting somebody. Like you go and apply for a job. I don't know about these days, maybe job interviews are done over remote media like this. But at some point or another, we have to understand that it's about being with the person you're serving. And until and unless you're prepared to enter into this experiment of bhakti, at least, as I said, with suspended disbelief, but not even with faith, just as an experiment. If you enter into the experiment of bhakti based upon the hearing and chanting of Krishna's name, fame, activities, paraphernalia, associates, dharma, just hearing about Krishna with an open mind, will have an effect on you. The effect will be that you become attracted to Krishna. Krishna is all attractive. So by hearing about Krishna, of course, it does help. We'll go beyond the neutral point. It does help to not be in that situation where you have no faith and you have no disbelief. You're just open in a neutral sense. Generally speaking, we see people come and have some contact with devotees and hear about Krishna because they have some desire. They have some desire for something more than the experiences that they're having in this material world. So it really does begin. I mean, I'm saying this stuff about suspending disbelief and so forth as a means of getting your feet in the water. But really, you'll see as time goes by, people come along because they want something. They want something more. They want an experience of something more or totally different than the experiences that they're having in life as it is. And as this purport says, if there's a desire, we want to satisfy that desire. And the nature of satisfaction that we all want is complete satisfaction. That's a very interesting word here. We'll share screen again and have a look at the verse. The word supersedity appears here. It's in verse number 5, and it's also in verse number 6. Suprasedati, Atma suprasedati, completely pleased. And if we go on, let's go on a little bit here now, because the question 6, verse 6 is the first answer that he's giving. He's making the point in verse 5 that these are very important questions. Now, they're very important questions, and these sages understand them to be very important questions because they have a wider view of reality than we do. Prabhupada talks a lot about this in his books. He talks about how people have a poor fund of knowledge. A poor fund of knowledge. But actually, these sages gathered here, they have a vast, broad fund of knowledge, which we see because they appointed Sutta, who'd been present when Sukadev spoke the Bhagavatam, and the completeness of Sukadev's presentation is understood. And so the totality of reality is comprehended here. So again, this word suprasedati comes, completely satisfied, completely pleased, satisfied, Atma, the self. So the verse is, the supreme occupation, Dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. So these are the first propositions of the Bhagavatam. And it loops back to what I was just saying about there's a desire here. They want answers to these questions. And so people who come along and want to ask questions of us as devotees, they want to know something. They have a desire, and the desire is actually for complete satisfaction. Even though a person might not be completely conscious of that. What we are looking for, all of us, is to be satisfied. And like the old Rolling Stones song goes, I can't get no satisfaction in this material world. They don't say that, but they talk about all kinds of material things in the song. People are telling me, you know, that I do this, I do that, but I can't get any satisfaction from these things anymore. They give me no sense of satisfaction. Satisfaction is what we all want, complete satisfaction of ourselves. We want to feel within ourselves that there's nothing more that I want. This is all that I need. But we can't find that because, as the purport to verse 5 says, because we turned away from Krishna, then we got ourselves entangled in all kinds of temporary situations that bring temporary satisfaction, and not even complete satisfaction, but just temporary. In order for satisfaction to be complete, it has to be permanent and undiminishing, or actually, yes, definitely not diminishing in any way. There has to be no diminishing return from our engagement in the activity that brings us the satisfaction. Now, this opens up the discussion or the presentation of that knowledge that begins in Bhagavad Gita with Krishna's first instructions to Arjuna, that, hey, Arjuna, forget the material. The material is just the covering. None of us are products of matter. Due to turning away from Krishna and forgetting Krishna and identifying ourselves with our material bodies, we've got ourselves down a very deep, dark rabbit hole. Because the basic premise is wrong. I am not this body. I am the living being, the eternal living being within the body. So Bhagavad Gita can never be sidestepped or overlooked. And actually, my advice to you all is keep your Bhagavad Gita with you at all times. I have a little shoulder bag that I carry, and I have a little pocket-sized Gita there with me wherever I go. Because, again, we're talking knowledge, we're talking fact. The simple fact is none of us have anything whatsoever to do with matter. And therefore this entire universe, this entire material thing that we're inside of. We're inside this body, but this body is inside a family, inside a society, inside a nation, inside the atmosphere on a planet, inside a universe. We're inside something, all of us. But our involvement with this, our getting involved with all of this, has not brought us any satisfaction. In fact, quite the contrary. We're all dissatisfied. We're all dissatisfied. We're all hankering, and we're all lamenting. Oh, if I just had this, if I just had this, oh, and I've lost that, and I've lost. You know. I saw a little documentary recently about I don't know if you're all familiar with a band or a group called the Bee Gees. And it was centered around an interview with they were brothers. Bee Gees meant brothers Gibb, the Gibb brothers. And there were actually 4 of them. One of them was an independent performer, and he died quite young. But then there were these three that were very, very close, and they became very, very famous. But then one of them died. And then another one of them died. And now there's just one of them left. And he was being interviewed. And it was a sad and sorry story. On the one hand, there was fabulous success, fame, wealth, and also, they're very talented people, amazing songs, amazing music. Millions and millions and millions of people love them. But then he's saying, well, then, in 2005, we lost Mo. He said, we lost Mo. And then a few years later, then Robin died, and now I'm all alone. And he can't make his music with them anymore. They're dead and gone. So it's all temporary. It's all temporary. And then he was in misery. You can see this man was in a miserable state because all that meant everything to him to sing and work and be famous with these brothers, and he loved them. Then they're gone, and everything they had therefore comes to an end. Nothing can be developed anymore. And then he's realizing at the end, well, it's not long before I'm going to die. And this is a situation of everyone in the material world. We're all a bunch of losers here. That was another song. Remember an old Beatles song called I'm a Loser? I'm a loser and I've lost someone who's dear to me. I'm not what I appear to be. I'm a loser. And actually, you see, the world is really all of now, especially the age we live in. Excuse me, I still got a bit of a throat. Just get a lozenge. It's all about winners and losers. The world's all about winners and losers. Whether you make the cut or not, whether you make the standard to be in this particular elite or that particular elite, whether you can be in the Mile High Club or this lounge or that lounge or whatever, or whether you can get access to anything. It's all based upon what within the particular frame of reference, what you've acquired in terms of material things, material abilities, material achievements, material objects. And there's winners and there's losers. Like in the golf tournament, you don't make the cut. You get to the point where after so many rounds, I think it's 16 players, they make the cut. The 16 lowest scores go into the final. But there might have been 200, 300 players at the beginning of the tournament. Sorry, you lose. You don't make the cut. But the reality of the material world is everybody's a loser. Everybody loses everything, every lifetime. And we live in a very dark age now because this fundamental knowledge that Krishna is giving right at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita is standard knowledge for the human being. And that is, I'm not this body. I'm actually a spiritual being. There is a spiritual dimension to existence. This material world is just like a spot. I was just reading the other day where Prabhupada says that this material world is like a spot. just a spot in infinity. And that infinity is not empty. First of all, infinity means endless, but it's not void, it's full. It's full of spiritual planets. And the topmost planet, the topmost not meaning in, the highest physical planet, but topmost in terms of manifestation of life and love is Krishna's planet. And in the middle of all of that, there's a spot. And that's called the material world. And in the material world, there are ignorant fools who think that all this talk is just belief. It's just belief. That's your belief. But then I come back to my point that if you have a sincere desire, you have a sincere desire and serious desire to know the truth of existence, to know the truth of existence. Why does anything exist? Why do I exist? What's the purpose of all of this? If you're not satisfied with any other answers that you've received on this matter, and you sincerely want to know the truth, then you will be open to hearing about Krishna. And Krishna is the most potent personality, the most potent entity in the entirety of everything. Lord Chaitanya says, Nam Akari Bahuda Anija Sama Shaktis. Nam Akari Bahuda. You have thousands and thousands of names. Nam Akari Bahuda Nija Shava Shaktis. Sava Shaktis means, and in these names, you have invested all of your transcendental energies. But further, there is no difference between the name and the person. This is the meaning of absolute. And Krishna is omniscient, omnipotent. All potency is in Krishna. All potency comes from Krishna. Everything comes from Krishna. Whether you believe it or not, this is a fact. These are books of knowledge. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate book of knowledge on the matter of the absolute truth. And if you're sincerely seeking knowledge, you're sincerely seeking the truth, then it's like, exposing yourself to radioactive material. It doesn't matter what you believe. If you expose yourself knowingly or unknowingly to radioactive material, you're going to get radioactivity disease. So as soon as we become exposed to Krishna, knowingly or unknowingly, we're becoming purified. Our consciousness is becoming purified. But if you are a sincere, conscious seeker of the truth, Krishna says in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Actually, that covers everybody. Even us now, in our conditioned state of forgetfulness of Krishna, we are in a state of surrendering to Krishna's material energy. We're actually indirectly surrendered to Krishna while we engage with the material energy. Because whose energy is it anyway? It's Krishna's energy. So this verse in the 4th chapter, verse number 11 of the 4th chapter. Ye yatamam prapadyante tangstataiva bhajaniyaham mamavat manovatante manushyapat kasavasha. Krishna says, as all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects. That's an indication that Krishna is the controller and the creator and the owner of everything. Everyone follows my path in all respects. So life in the material world, the conditions of life in the material world are things that we have to surrender to. We have to surrender to birth, old age, disease, and death. So whose path is that? That's a part of the material creation. That's Krishna's path. So we're always surrendered to Krishna. But in the material world, we're surrendered to Krishna in ignorance, in forgetfulness of Krishna, and we're pursuing a path of personal, individual selfishness that brings no satisfaction. Brings no satisfaction. So that's a very important point to be clear on, that we're actually always surrendered to Krishna. But right now we're surrendered indirectly and unfavorably surrendered to Krishna. And therefore we can never be satisfied with anything that comes our way. We may, as it's temporarily, get some relief from our itching condition. It's a very interesting point for me that the word in Sanskrit for desire is ichcha. Ichcha. Literally, itch. And desire's itch. I've got an itch. I've got an itch. I got the itch for whatever it is. But there's no satisfaction. There's no, you might itch, you might scratch for a while, and there's a sense of relief. But then the itch comes back worse than ever. And that's the nature of material existence. There's no satisfaction whatsoever. And if you are a sincere seeker of the truth, Krishna reciprocates from within your heart and gives you a taste, as the beautiful verse of Lord Chaitanya's from the Shikshastakam, the first verse explains that this Sankirtan, this congregational chanting of the holy names, congregational chanting and hearing of the holy names, the activities, the fame, the paraphernalia, hearing of anything about Krishna, brings a spontaneous feeling from within, a spontaneous feeling of satisfaction. And the taste for other things gradually begins to wane and fade away. This is, as Krishna says in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, this is the higher taste. And that's what we're all hankering for, this higher taste. But coming right back to what I said at the beginning, all kinds of beliefs that people hold, and on the basis of beliefs, we make promises. We enter into agreements and so on. And all of these beliefs can be a total block to the acquisition of real knowledge and the higher taste. I think I've mentioned it before. When I was very young in the 1950s, I started school in 1955. And every Friday, the whole school would assemble in the schoolyard, facing a flagpole, and the flag, the Australian flag, would be tied up. There's a way you tie it with a slip knot, so that you run it up the pole and then you pull another cord, and the flag unfurls. So we would all be out there, all the little children from grade 1 all the way through to grade 7 in the school, all, you know, marking ourselves off, shoulder, arm's length, standing there, all standing at attention. And then the school band would be there with the drums rolling and everything going on. And then the flag would go up. And when it got to the top, there was a boom on the bass drum. Somebody would pull the cord, the flag would unfold. And we were all instructed and trained to, as that happened, we'd all put our hands on our hearts and say, I am an Australian. Oh no, we'd start with, I am an Australian, just say it. Then we'd put our hands on our hearts and we'd have to say, I love my country. And then we'd all have to salute the flag. And actually, it was like a Hitler salute. We had to put our hand up like this to the flag and say, I honor her flag. And then we'd have to put our hands back on our hearts and say, I promise to obey her laws. And there was more to it. That's all I remember right now. The whole ceremony, every Friday in the schoolyard, inculcating, indoctrinating a concept or a series of concepts, about what I am an Australian. What I should be doing, love my country, honor her flag, promise to obey her rules, her laws. And then supposedly I'll live happily ever after in Australia. But it doesn't happen. It's not reality. It's a concoction. It's an illusion. But what I'm getting at is these things go deep into our consciousness and they become very fixed beliefs. And on the basis of the belief, we make promises. And nobody likes to break a promise. That's another thing about promises that's very early inculcated into us, and rightly so. You should keep your promises. You should keep your word. Nobody likes a liar. Nobody likes a masquerader, a charade. Nobody likes a pretender. Be honest with me. Tell the truth. Everybody wants the truth. Now, on one side, you can say, well, if we're all just products of matter and the nature of matter, the material existence is the survival of the fittest, then what does it matter whether you tell the truth or not? It's immediately proof. The idea that you have to be honest and truthful is that there's something there's something metaphysical about life. It's not just this crazy struggle for existence and, winner takes all, which is what material situations are, especially like amongst animals. No, this is indication that we are something more, that we are something higher than this, and that these things must be respected: the truth, honesty, keep your word, all these things. But what if you've made a promise to an illusion? You've made a promise to dedicate yourself to something which is an illusion. And then you come to Krishna consciousness and you're faced with something that you want to commit yourself to. But then you see, well, actually, things are holding you back. If you review the promises that you made in your life, you'll see this is what's holding you back. We've made commitments to illusions. But because the natural inclination of a good person is to keep your word, don't break your promise. What you have to see is a part of what Krishna calls the abandoning process, is to really be prepared in order to make a promise to Krishna, break a promise to someone else. Break your promise to your nation. I actually broke my promise to the nation when I was 18, because I was brought up in all of that stuff through the 50s into the 60s. I'm an Australian, I love my country, I honor a flag, I promise to obey the laws. And then along came the law that all 18-year-olds will have to register to become possibly conscripted to go into the armed forces to go to Vietnam. Well, that was a real wake-up call. Because I was part of a generation, that my generation that was born post-World War II, there'd never been as highly educated a generation of people in the history of, actually in the history of the Western world. And we could all see through it. It was bogus. There was no need for us to be up in Vietnam fighting to stop, because it was all based upon a world that didn't exist anymore, which was what happened in World War II, that we've got to get up there and fight the Yellow Peril to keep them away. The Japanese were an expansive empire at that time, and they were headed for Australia. And I probably would have volunteered to join the armed forces at that time. This was what I was telling my father, who couldn't understand why I was saying, Dad, this is all nonsense. This is just a proxy war between the communist world and the capitalist world, and they're experimenting with all kinds of weapons up there. And the poor people of Vietnam are just the meat in the sandwich. Why should we do this? It's got nothing to do with this. Oh, and there was such outrage at this, that, oh, you're traitors, and so on and so forth, all because of very deeply held beliefs. And I broke the law. I didn't register. So many other people did it. So we can only do this if we have higher knowledge, a higher taste. We were a fortunate generation in that we had more knowledge about the nature of the world and the political situation of the world than our parents did. So because we had more knowledge and more understanding, then we were able to make decisions that they wouldn't have been able to make. So the same thing for us as devotees. We're hearing and experiencing something, which by our individual experience and by our comparing notes with others, we understand actually there's something happening here. There's something really happening here. And it's coming from within. It's coming from within me. Something is awakening in me that I like very much. and that I like it so much that I'm not interested in all this material stuff anymore. I'm just not interested. This is because, and life becomes a lot easier when you understand this. This is because this is the truth. Krishna does exist. We do all have a relationship with him. And he wants us back in that relationship as quickly as possible. That's why all of this is happening. This is why the International Society for Krishna Consciousness exists. Prabhupada one time in 1975, it was in Australia, he was in Perth. He came in through Perth and they were waiting for a connecting flight. He was sitting out in the car park on a bench, just getting some fresh air. And I think it was my godbrother Amoga went and sat with him. You can find this in the conversations. Prabhupada says, why am I here in this old age? Why am I here in this remote place in such old age? He said, it is because of love, for love. And the deepest thing that we all search for is love, permanent love, not temporary, ephemeral relationships. A love that lasts, or a love forever and a day. There's a song, but love that lasts forever and a day, never ends. And I think I've quoted this verse many times, but I love it. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabuloi Shravanadi Sudha Chitta Karaye Udoy. Madhya Lila chapter 22, verse I think it's 107. You can find it 17, 18, 19, 110, somewhere in that. Chapter 22 of the Madhya Lila. And this is a very nice verse. It's a mixture of Sanskrit and Bengali. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema is Sanskrit. And Nitya Siddha means eternally established Krishna Prema. Love for Krishna is eternally established in our very being. We exist to love Krishna. That's our permanent existence. Our temporary existence is to love Australia. But none of us can stay here. We might think, oh, all right, I can tolerate all the difficulties of living anywhere in the world. That may be. And you may make the commitment to it. Life in Australia, life in America, life wherever. But you can't stay, because this is a temporary place. So even you make that deep commitment. And as they say, be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for your country. What's the ultimate sacrifice? You have to leave, you die, you're gone.
I got that verse, Prabhu. So it is Madhya Lila 22nd chapter, 107.
107, I was right. Wow, for once I was
Beautiful.
right.
You are great. So pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of the living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source. When the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens.
And this is a very important point that Srila Prabhupada makes in this regard. This love awakens as soon as you open yourself to hearing with faith. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam
Pritipurvakam.
Tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamu priyanti te tesham ivanu kam patam aham magyana jam tamaha what is the last part of that verse? Nasha yat mabhavasto jnana dipena basvata. This is Bhagavad Gita chapter 10, verses 10 and 11. Two of what are called the Chatur Sloki of the Bhagavad Gita. In other words, there's 4 verses here, 8, 9, 10, and 11 in chapter 10, which basically encapsulate the entirety of Bhagavad Gita. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And in regard to this, in the first verse, Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam. Priti Purvakam means in loving ecstasy. Priti means love. And in one lecture Srila Prabhupada gave, and you can look this up, he quotes this. And he says, this priti means love. And he said, you cannot engage in devotional service on any level. And that's what we're all doing here right now. We're engaging in devotional service by hearing and chanting about Krishna. Prabhupada says you can't do that unless your love for Krishna has been reawakened. And that reawakened has come through, and it always comes through contact with the pure devotee of the Lord. There's a song by Narottam Das Thakur. We sing for the Guru Puja every day. Guru Puja to Srila Prabhupada. And one line says, Krishna Prema, Krishna, I lost it there. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoiti. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoiti Advidya Vinasa Jate. Advidya means ignorance. Advidya Vinasa Jate means by him ignorance is destroyed. And how? Prema Bhakti Krishna Jaha Hoite. From him ecstatic prema emanates. And that ecstatic prema is like fire that you bring a flame and you put it on a pile of sticks, and those sticks will burst into flame. Fire, which is dormant within that wood, is brought out by contact with fire. Love for Krishna now lies dormant within the heart of every living entity. And we are fortunate living entities who have somehow or other come in contact with a pure devotee of the Lord, from whom this ecstatic love for Krishna is emanating in his every word, his every gesture. So therefore, coming back to these books, this Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, these are like little capsules of prema bhakti. You know those capsules you get, time release capsules for colds, where you get the little capsule and it's got little pilules in it, blue ones, red ones, green ones, whatever. And it says on the packet, the white ones work for 3 hours. Then for the next 3 hours, the blue ones work, and then the next, the red. So you get 12 hours of relief, or 12 hours of therapy for your cold in this little capsule. So that's what these books are like. First reading, you might be like, well, what's all this about? Well, I don't get this stuff. Second reading, third reading, or hearing in the association of devotees, the things become clearer. Not only do things become clearer in your mind, things begin to manifest in your heart. It's undeniable feelings of love for Krishna and anything to do with Krishna. Attraction develops. That's because Nityasiddha Krishna Prema, love for Krishna, is eternally established within your very being. And what was the second part of it? Super Krishna is established, permanently established. Then what?
Without feeling, remembering service. 107, right? Yeah. When the heart is purified by
No,
hearing
before
and
that,
chanting.
before that.
Okay. The pure love for Krishna is eternally established in the hearts of the living entities. It is not something to be gained from another source.
It is not something to be gained from another source. That's the Bengali half of the first. Nityasiddha Krishna Prema, it's there. Sajja Kabuno. You don't have to go somewhere to get it.
Yeah.
You don't have to bring it and put it inside. You don't have to implant something in yourself. It's there. It's always been there. It's just that because we turned away from Krishna and we started asking the wrong questions about the wrong things, we've developed the wrong conceptions and totally forgotten this. Then, Shravana,
Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karaye Udaya.
by hearing and chanting, what does it say?
So when the heart is purified by hearing and chanting, this love naturally awakens.
There you are. There you are. And how does it all come? By asking the right questions. By asking the question.
4.24.
4.24.
4 BG. So tad viddhi pranipate na pariprashnena sevaya upadekshantite jnanam dharina tattvadarshinaha.
What is that?
By asking, by surrendering to sorry.
Just try to learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master.
By surrendering into him, by asking questions submissively and surrendering and rendering service unto him.
It's a very famous verse from 4th chapter, verse number 34. Everyone knows it. Well, most people know. But what does the next verse say? Next verse, Super Krishna.
Yeah, just 4:35. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. Yajnatva na punarmoham evam yashasi pandava yenam bhutani asheshani dakshasi atmani athomai. The translation as and when you have thus learned the truth, you will know that all living beings are but part of me and that they are in me and are mine.
What is the first part of the verse?
Yajnatva na punarmoham.
No, the translation.
And when you have thus learned the truth.
And when you have thus learned the truth. How? By approaching
the spiritual master.
Krishna's devotee. You approach Krishna's devotee and it is all revealed to you. And when you have learned the truth, then what? You will never fall into such illusion. Again, what is the illusion? The illusion is that I am this body, I am a product of matter, this is my home, I am an Australian, I love my country, and all of this stuff. I support the Tigers, and I'm a tragic for these things, and this is how and this is what I am, and this is what I always will be. But what happens when you will never fall into this illusion again, and then what? What's it say?
You will, all living beings are.
You
so
will.
You will know that all living beings are but part of me, and that they are in me and are mine.
You know that all living beings are but part of me, that they are in me and they are mine. That's us. We belong to Krishna. We belong to Krishna. And Krishna wants us back. Prabhupada says many times in many places, and you can hear it in his voice, Krishna is very much anxious for us to come back to him. And then he says, therefore, we are opening so many centers all over the world just to give people a chance to hear about Krishna. Otherwise, if you don't hear about Krishna, the list is endless of the things that you become entangled in hearing about. And anything which is not Krishna is Maya, is illusion, is ephemeral, temporary. It has an existence, but it has no substance. And therefore we're miserable. We're so miserable. So this Krishna consciousness movement is offering us the opportunity to ask the question and get the right answer. And as such, it's a very intimate gesture of love from the Lord. It's a very intimate and loving gesture here. Take this holy name, that's all. Just take this mantra and chant. It's called Gati, the most wonderful way, the most wonderful path in life. And all you have to do is use your own voice to chant Krishna's name. By the sound of your own voice, you will liberate yourself from all the entanglements you have in this material world, just by listening to your own voice. We're all listening to our own voices all the time when we speak. But put these words on your tongue. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And everything changes from the inside out, undeniably. And, well, be careful, Prabhupada used to say, be careful, because you'll become addicted to this. And actually, we're all addicted. I'm going on a bit long this morning, but I'm enjoying it, so I'm going to carry on. We're all addicted. We're all addicts. We're all addicted to gratifying our senses through contact of the senses with the objects of the senses in this world. Everybody's got their addiction. Just that plain, simple activity, no matter what varieties of forms it takes, and there's infinite varieties of forms of sense gratification available, we're addicted to it. We're addicted to it. It's not that we are not meant to be addicted. We're just addicted to the wrong thing now. We're meant to be addicted to Krishna. Addictus was the idea of addiction, means you can't let it go. You think it's got a hold on you, but it's because you won't let it go. That's the whole thing. The illusion is, oh, this has got a hold on me. But no, it's me who's holding on to it. I just have to let it go. But of course, you can't let it go unless you get something better. And that's why Krishna consciousness is called the higher taste. Get addicted to Krishna. Because if you're not addicted to Krishna, you're going to be addicted to Maya. And Prabhupada says, just as there is no limit to the ways in which Maya can kick you, there's no limit to the loving exchanges you can engage in with Krishna. So the choice is there now. And the choice, even though we may be faulty, even though we may be offensive or deficient in so many ways in this practice of Krishna consciousness, Krishna makes it very clear right from the moment he begins talking about it in the Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 40th verse. Nehavikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate. There's no loss in this activity. You're not the loser ever in Krishna consciousness. You're always the loser in Maya consciousness, in material consciousness. But in Krishna consciousness, it doesn't matter who you are or what your so-called qualification or lack of qualification is in material terms. You are never the loser. There is no loss and there is no diminution in this process. It's just a matter of time. Drops of water wear away the stone. The slow and gradual process is irrevocably working. And one day, the day will come when we'll just leave the material world and never come back. Hare Krishna. Does anyone have any questions or comments to make? Any reflections on their own experience or anything?
I have a reflection I'm happy to share. Thank you for class, and it's really lovely to see you back, and all my love to Sarva as well. So please tell her I said hello. I hope she's feeling good.
I'm so enlivened by all of you. I just feel so happy to see you all again. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Two things, I guess I've been writing lots of things down, but two stood out to me. I did not know that the Sanskrit word for desire is icha.
Icha.
That's just fascinating. It really is.
Oh, there's so many words that you find in English come right from Vedic Sanskrit.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that brilliant? Icha. Icha. I got the itch.
Yeah, because that's what it's like.
It's an itch.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it itches in your mind. It just itches, keeps coming back, and you itch, and then you do something about it, and there's some relief, but then it comes back more.
Yeah.
That's a fact. You can't. Nobody can deny that. That's everyone's experience.
Yeah.
The itch. I mean, they talk about that in marriages. They talk about the 7-year itch. Yeah, they talk about the 7-year itch. After 7 years of marriage, you get the itch. Well, am I with the right person? Maybe, well, she looks pretty good. And then on you go. And that never stops. It's not that we become stones. The desire, there's a very beautiful verse right at the end of the 2nd chapter, which encapsulates how you come to be able to deal with all of this. And it says, verse number 70, Apuriyamana machalo pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti yapa tadvat kama yang pravishanti save Sashanti mapnoti nakama kami. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled, but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. Therefore, it's all 2 points about that. If you go right back to Krishna's initial instructions at the beginning of the 2nd chapter, where he says, Na Tvevaham Jatunasham, Na Tvam Neme Janati Pahat, Na Chaivana Bhavishyama Savivayam Taparam, Dehino Spin Yata Dehe Komaram Yovanam Jara, Tata Dehantaram, Viras Tatarana Muyati. These two verses, the fundamental instructions. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age. The soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. And Krishna's conclusion about all of this at the end of the second chapter is what that verse I just read about the incessant flow of desires. But what does Krishna say immediately after he explains the situation of the soul in the material world? He says, Matra spasha stukuntaya sitoshna sukha dukkada agama payano nichas tangs titikshasvava. That the non-permanent appearance and disappearance of happiness and distress in this world is like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. It arises simply because of our perception of the world, as seeing and feeling and tasting and touching of the world. And one must learn to tolerate the non-permanence of all of this, because it never stops. And therefore desires never stop. Doesn't mean because you take a vow of celibacy that you're not going to have sex desire. It doesn't, and also another verse in that regard is verse number 59. Let me just think if my memory serves me well. Yes. Vishaya vinivatante, 259. Vishaya vinivatante nirahara devina rasapyasyam rasopyasya param drishtva. And this brings us right back to our main point. Although the embodied living being may be restricted in sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects still remains. But, and this is a big pivot, but ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, one becomes fixed in consciousness. You can't artificially stop anything. You can't stop. It's like this. You can't stop the world. You can't stop the sun rising. You can't stop seeing things. You can't stop hearing things. You can't stop touching things, smelling things, tasting things. But Krishna says, you cease the lower activities by experiencing something higher, which gives you a level of satisfaction you don't have. And that's all we're looking for, to be satisfied. And there's nothing wrong with that. You must be satisfied. You must, because you constantly, something's driving us. You can't ignore that. And you have a right to be satisfied. But you have to know what is the platform of satisfaction. Prabhupada was once asked, what's the purpose of life? He said, the purpose of life is to enjoy yourself, to enjoy. But he said, you have to know what is the actual platform of pleasure, where real, satisfying, sustaining, unending pleasure is to be found. Because that's what you want. And it's only found in one place, in your constitutional position as the loving servant of Krishna. And where does that ultimately, where does that satisfaction come from? It comes from the Lord, because the Lord is satisfied by you. that verse 6, such devotional service must become uninterrupted and unmotivated in order to completely satisfy the self. Atma superseded. So Atma means, it's used to describe the mind, the body, the soul. All the word Atma covers all those. But more than that, it covers Paramatma, super soul, Atma. All levels of Atma become satisfied when you become fully fixed in unmotivated, uninterrupted devotional activities. Your mind becomes satisfied, your body becomes satisfied, yourself, your heart becomes satisfied, and the Lord who is in your heart also becomes satisfied. So that satisfaction is ultimately also coming from Krishna. The more Krishna is satisfied, the more you become satisfied. And the more we are ignoring satisfying Krishna, the more dissatisfied we become.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful purport I'll just leave you with. I won't read it, but I'll leave it for you to read. It's in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna's talking about, he's elaborating more about the three modes of material nature. And verse 16 talks about the austerities of the mind. So if you read that, you'll also get a lot of insight into how to do that, how to actually practice austerity with your mind. And it begins with satisfaction. The mind has to be satisfied. And we have to practice being satisfied with our situation and engaging in hearing and chanting about Krishna. And we become satisfied. The mind becomes satisfied. The mind is very important in all of this. We could talk more about that later. I'm sorry, I've gone on so long today. It's quarter to 10.
No problem.
I'm just so happy to be back with you all. And like I said, you have said so many times, you're such sincere people and so attentive. And
well, I found a similarity in the 5.22 as well.
5.22. Oh, yes.
Yahi sampasya bhoga dukkha yoneya evate adi antavanta kaunteya na teshu ramate buddha. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them.
There we are. But none of it works. None of it happens unless you open yourself up to this higher depth. And as soon as you do, there's no turning back. And the wonderful thing about it all is that Srila Prabhupada's given us a wonderful society, an association of devotees, like-minded people, so that no matter what kind of challenges and obstructions come in our way, we've got support of those like-minded people. And some of them more experienced than we are, and some of them less experienced than we are, and some on the same level. And that immediately gives us a way of practicing three basic activities that should never be given up: sacrifice, charity, and austerity. We sacrifice by submitting ourselves to hearing. That's a sacrifice. Give up your time to hear from more experienced people. Perform charity. Give up your time to give what you know to less experienced people. And penance, we follow our regulations, we follow our rules, we follow our regulative principles. And these three things of practice of charity, sacrifice, charity, and penance, Krishna says at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, these must never be given, no matter what position you're in. And they can be practiced in any position. And Krishna reciprocates. Yayatamam prapachante tangstataiva vajamyaham. As you surrender to me, I will reward you accordingly. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. My heart is bursting. I'm so happy to. I was very nervous and unsure coming into this, but this is such a lovely Sangha. I'm so happy to be back with you.
We're so happy to have you back.
Thank you.
Very much so.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Bhagavat Ashraya Prabhu ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.